Right now you're listening to me on the MXL 990 condenser microphone, which does not cost $990. It has an MSRP of $99. So we'll see if the MXL is XL-ent. This is the first time I've used an MXL microphone in a very long time. This one specifically was recommended to me in a lot of different comment sections for other mic reviews that I've done, especially because I do really like condenser microphones, and I have been quite impressed with the sound quality, and I'm excited to see what's cracking with the MXL 990. So a couple things to get out of the way first. Right now, you are listening to me on the 990. We'll go over here. You are listening to me on the 990 through the Rodecaster Pro 2. And right now I'm on the Rode NT1 preset with no effects and no processing. This is the MXL 990's dry signal just out of the box. A thing that I like about this is that it is a very flat sound, almost a boring sound. And that's something I've come to appreciate in microphones more as time has gone on. And the reason I like that is because it gives you, it's like a blank canvas. Sometimes it is nice to have a microphone that has a really specific characteristic to its audio. This is all just my opinion. It's not science or anything. But other times it's nice to have a microphone like this, or even something like the SM7B, where it's very sort of flat and almost like, this sounds nice. This is a nice sounding microphone. You just plug it into an interface, it's going to sound good. But it almost sounds a little dull and boring. And the reason that that's nice is because then you can add in some processing and really help the microphone to shine with your specific voice and in your specific environment. So as you just heard, I did turn the processing back on for now because this is how I like the microphone to sound. And I want it to be an example of not just the unprocessed sort of plain sound of the microphone, but what you can do when you add things in like this and you can bring it to life in its own way, which applies to many different microphones. When it comes to microphones, that $100 price point is kind of the magic number. There are definitely some hidden gems and some diamonds in the rough at lower price points. But once you hit $100, it's like everything unlocks and you just have so many options from established companies and from smaller companies. MXL is funny because the last time I used one was, oh my gosh, it was 12 years ago. At one of my first digital media teaching jobs. I inherited this program. We had some audio gear that came with it, and there was an MXL microphone. I didn't know a lot about microphones at the time. I was only familiar with like Shure SM57, and Rode video mics. That was like the extent of my mic knowledge. And the MXL like felt really good and it sounded really good. And I thought it was like, this must be the high-end premium microphone that this program had. So I was like always so careful with it, which you should be anyway, but I was always so careful to like keep it in a case and do all this stuff. I didn't realize it was like a budget microphone, but that's kind of fun, right? Like figuring out that, wow, this is not terribly, it's not going to break the bank to buy this microphone and it sounds nice. This specific color that I have is sort of like the standard 990 color, which is very similar to like an old school RE20. They also do have some other versions of this. You can get, you know, a black one. You can get, some of them have LEDs in them. Honestly, I didn't see those when I was ordering this one. Otherwise, I probably would have bought those just for the fun of it. But this is sort of the classic 990. And for your $99 or your $100, you do get some cool things. It comes in its own carrying case, which again, for me 12 years ago, made me immediately assume that it was very premium. It comes with this shock mount, which is it's an okay shock mount. It's not shockingly good or bad, but it gets the job done. As you can see, I can shake my boom arm and you're not going to hear a lot. It's just one of the ones that clamps the microphone in. You don't have to screw anything in, which is nice because you can then turn the microphone to change its angle without having to adjust your boom arm. Kind of like that. It works really well. The downside to it is the little knob that you tighten it, loosen with, feels very cheap. It's very similar to the ones you get with like an NW700, $20 or $30 microphone that comes with a shock mount. This part here feels very similar to that. So not the best shock mount in the world, but it definitely gets the job done, and I'm glad that it comes with it. It also does come with a standard mount if you don't want to use the shock mount. And it does come with some extra bands for the shock mount and a 3/8 to 5/8 adapter as well to use it with a variety of arms. So you get pretty much everything you need other than a cable to get up and running. This is a condenser microphone, so you do need phantom power, which, as I've said many times, is awesome because every interface provides phantom power. And that means even if you have a very inexpensive interface, or even if you want to run it directly into like a camera's XLR input, you're probably going to have more than enough gain to run this microphone. Now, as you might have heard, really the only thing so far the only criticism I have so far about this microphone is the propensity for plosives, which is why I've been trying to position it off to the side and angle it so that way my breath is going over here. It doesn't come with a windscreen or a pop filter or anything like that. And this is what that sounds like. Peter Piper pitched a podcast if I'm speaking past it. Peter Piper pitched a podcast if I'm getting close to it. This does have a more pronounced proximity effect than some of the other microphones I've been talking about lately, which means if I get close to the microphone, you hear my voice it gets really deep and, like bassy and broadcasty. And if I get away, that goes away. That's just the quality of the microphone. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. Some people love it. Some people don't like it. Some people prefer a microphone that, if you're kind of just anywhere near it, it's going to sound the same. You don't have to get close to it to do anything. And if I take it out of the shock mount, you can kind of hear it's actually not crazily susceptible to handling noise, which is pretty cool. Obviously, if I'm hitting it, you're going to hear it, but I can shake it around. I can handhold this microphone and it's not too much of a problem. Although since it comes with a shock mount and the shock mount does absorb a lot of handling noise, it makes sense to use that a lot. Now, this is a condenser microphone I've talked about a few times before in other videos. Sometimes people love the sound of a condenser microphone, but they're scared to use one because of the environment they're recording in, and they think I need a dynamic microphone because it's going to isolate sound. And again, this is just my opinion. It's not science or anything, but in my experience, when it comes to dynamic versus condenser, you really should go with what you think sounds best on your voice and what you like the most. I have never found a dynamic microphone that's going to totally change horrible sound treatment in a space where a condenser would sound awful. Like, if a condenser microphone is going to pick up more environmental tone, a dynamic microphone is not going to magically fix that. So just go with the one that you like. Focus on sound treating your space as best you can. That's going to solve way more problems than anything else. But even the room I'm in right now, there's some sound treatment in here. It's not at a professional level or an industry standard level by any means, and it's fine. Now, I do want to do a few comparisons here, and specifically, I'm trying to stick with microphones that make a lot of sense to compare to this, either in price or performance or functionality. And where did it go? There it is. This microphone that you're listening to me on right now is the SE X1A condenser microphone, and I did a video about this one recently. This one is interesting because it's $90, so it's very similar in price to the MXL, but it does not come with a shock mount. I bought this after making my review because this microphone is so incredibly susceptible to handling noise. It really does need the shock mount to reduce that shockingly insane amount of handling noise. But this is another, relatively affordable condenser microphone that I've talked about lately that I think is pretty awesome. But right now I'm using this on the Rode Broadcaster preset. And over here back on the MXL, I'm using this on the Rode NT1 preset. But now I've turned off that preset on the MXL, and this is just its dry signal straight out of the box, and this is the dry signal of the SE microphone straight out of the box. One thing in the review for this microphone that I noticed was it changes so much from the dry signal to the process signal. If I go in here and I add processing back, it almost sounds like I switched microphones entirely, and then I go back to the dry signal. That is true for any microphone, but I feel like over here on the MXL microphone, this is no processing. When I turn processing on, it does change things, but it doesn't seem like it's quite as drastic of a change. I don't really know what that means. It's just something I've noticed with both of these microphones, but we'll go back to no processing. This is no processing over here on the MXL and no processing over here on the SE microphone. So these two recently, in terms of like budget condenser microphones, have been the ones that I've liked the most because they're basically the same price. They're both microphones that people recommended to me in comments of other videos, and they're both brands. I haven't used MXL in forever, and I haven't used SE ever before this microphone, so it was fun to see how good the SE sounded. And now the next microphone that I want to compare is a dynamic microphone. This is the classic, the Rode PodMic. This one is a $99 microphone, so it's the exact same price as the MXL. It does not come with a shock mount, but it doesn't really need one because it has this built-in yoke. And Rode does the thing with a lot of their yokes and a lot of their mounts and shock mounts and things where they have a 5/8 and a 3/8 like thread just built right in there. So not needing anything else to attach a microphone to most boom arms and stands is something I really love about Rode mics and Rode shock mounts, and I wish more manufacturers did that. But the PodMic is a $99 microphone. It's a dynamic microphone, so I am on actually I have no presets. I thought I was on the PodMic preset. I have nothing going. Now I've got the PodMic preset turned on over here. So this is what it sounds like when I have some processing, and this is what it sounds like when I don't have any processing. And speaking of no processing, Right now, this is me on the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. You can notice right there, there is a lot more low end in this microphone straight out of the box. My biggest critique with the PodMic, as much as it holds a special place in my heart because it was like one of my first real like podcasting microphones when it was released. I was very excited for these. They're great microphones. They're built like tanks, but they really lean towards the high end and they don't always sound great on every voice. You can EQ it out, but sometimes these take a lot more EQ work to sound good than other microphones do. So the PodMic, if it works with your voice, it's fantastic. If it doesn't work with your voice, it's fantastically bad. And you kind of never know until you just try it with your voice. But let's go here to the MXL and turn on processing. So now you're listening to me on the MXL 990 with processing. And if I can push the button properly, now you're listening to me on the Rode PodMic with the PodMic preset. So that's both of these microphones with EQ. And again, these are at the exact same price point. And ain't it great? This is the Shure SM58. Super classic microphone, but again, the exact same price point as the MXL 990. This is a $99 microphone with no effects and no processing. It is a dynamic microphone just like the PodMic was, compared over here to the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. But now we can add in a little bit of processing. We can go through the process of adding processing. This is the SM58, and now I turned on the Rode Procaster preset, which I think sounds really great with this microphone on the Rode Caster Pro 2, Procaster, Rodecaster. It's always super confusing. And then we can jump back over here to the MXL 990 on the Rode NT1 preset. So this is the processed MXL 990 against the processed Shure SM58. Don't it sound great? And I can turn off that processing again. So this is the SM58 with no effects and no processing. And this is the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. The next microphone is going to look very similar to this, and that is this one right here, the Samson Q2u, which has a very different sound than the 58. It is the least expensive microphone that we're going to be looking at today with an MSRP of $69. I've talked about this microphone before because what's really cool is for that $69, you get the mic, you get a little stand, you get a mic clip, you get a windscreen, and it's a USB XLR combo mic. So you get a lot of versatility out of one microphone. It is strange, though, every time I use this, how susceptible to handling noise it is, considering it's a microphone that is designed to be handheld. So it's sort of weird, and it's also prone to plosives quite a bit, more than the SM58 is. So either positioning it well or using a windscreen is really important. And it has a little switch, so I can turn it off, and I can turn that back on, and now you can hear all of the wonderful things that I have to say. So that's kind of a lot of versatility at a really affordable price. This is a great microphone for someone who wants to jump into the world of having a dedicated microphone and doesn't want to spend a ton of money. Maybe you want to start with USB and then move on to an interface or a mixer at some point. And what's cool about this is even if time goes on and you decide you want to like move on and get a higher end microphone, or you outgrow it, so to speak, you kind of don't outgrow it because it's always a great one to have around. And you know, if you need a guest, you need a second microphone, you need to loan a microphone to someone, this is a really great choice for that. So this is the Q2u with no effects and no processing, and this is the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. Again, about a $30 price difference between these microphones, with the MXL being the more expensive of the two. But as we go through here, let's add in some effects. So now we're back on the MXL. We're back on it. We have not left the MXL, but now I have processing enabled again. And now we're over here on the Q2u with the NT1 preset. So this microphone with effects and processing sounds this way, and without effects and processing sounds like this. Actually not as much of a difference, especially compared to like the SE microphone, but it does clean things up a little bit. And again, something I've talked about a lot lately is I've been learning, especially over the past year or so, how important it is to spend some time adding EQ to a microphone, even when a microphone sounds great or you think, yeah, this microphone's perfect, I don't need to do anything to it. If you can add in just a little bit of EQ, especially for your specific voice and your environment, you can really, really improve the overall quality of a microphone's sound. And again, just for reference, now we're back on the MXL 990 with the Rode NT1 preset. I forgot which NT1 it was. And this is what that sounds like over here. Very different qualities between these microphones. This is the MXL 990 with effects and processing. This is the Samson Q2u with effects and processing. Now this is the Samson without any effects and without any processing. And This is the MXL 990 without any effects and without any processing. So now we've talked about Samson, we've talked about the Q2u, we've done a few dynamic microphones. Can I do this cut really cool? This microphone right here, I don't know how well that edited together, is the Samson Q9u, which is a higher end microphone. The MSRP on this one is about $149, and I say about because it changes all the time. Not just the price of the microphone, because it goes on sale, doesn't go on sale, but the MSRP. Originally, when this was released a few years ago, it was closer to $200, and now it's been hovering around that $149 price point. But just like the Q2u, it is a USB XLR combo mic. The benefit being that the Q9u is USB-C and the Q2u is mini USB. It's like very old school connector that it's very hard to even find those cables anymore. But this is the Samson Q9u with no effects and no processing. And this is the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. I feel like these are much closer in sound quality, different, still very different. So this is the MXL and this is the Q9u. You can definitely hear a difference between them, but it sounds significantly less different than some of the other microphones. So again, this is the Samson with no effects and no processing, and this is the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. But let's go into our effects here. Let's stop listening to no effects and go into yes FX. This is the MXL 990 with the Rode NT1 preset. And now we're over here on the Q9u with the Shure SM7B preset. So this is the Samson, what it sounds like with processing, and the Samson without processing, just the dry signal there. Again, a little bit less of a leap to go to this process signal from the unprocessed one, and then how that compares over here to the MXL 990. I think the Q9u is a pretty underrated microphone, especially for its price and considering its versatility. And it's a great sounding microphone, but in this case, between these two, I'm really, really liking the MXL 990. The more I've been using this microphone, not just for this video, but other things, the more I've become really impressed with it. It's a cool microphone, but let's look at some other microphones that I've also been impressed with. One signature of my videos is groan-inducing wordplay, and I sure want to continue down that road by talking about the Rode NT1 Signature Series. That was a stretch. That's what you call a sweaty joke. This is the Rode NT1 Signature Series. This is a $159 condenser microphone. Rode updated their NT1 series relatively recently with the NT1 5th generation, which is $269. And then they added in the Signature Series, which is basically the same microphone as the 5th generation, but the big update there was that it had USB-C and XLR functionality, just like the last two microphones we talked about, whereas the Signature Series is just XLR only. So if you don't need any of that USB functionality, which the practicality of it in the 5th gen is a little funky anyway, then you can just get the great sound of that microphone right here. And supposedly it's supposed to come in different colors, like blue and purple and green and all those like really cool Rode colors, but I haven't seen those available yet, at least at the time I'm recording this video. So I've just seen the classic version here, which is a very sharp looking, it's not sharp, it's a very soft microphone, but it's a sharp looking microphone. And one thing about the NT1, all of the NT1s, is that they are pretty prone to handling noise. So it's usually good to use them with a shock mount, but it comes with a very nice shock mount, and they're also prone to plosives. So either using the pop filter that it comes with or just positioning the microphone in a way that it's not going to attract plosives is definitely what you want to do. So this is the Rode Signature Series with no effects and no processing, and this is the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. Without processing, they sound probably the most similar, I think, at least in my headphones, of any of the microphones we've compared today. There seems to be the least amount of a leap between this, the MXL, and this over here, the Rode NT1 Signature Series. Keeping in mind, there is a $50 price difference between them, with the Rode being the more expensive road to go down. But let's add in some effects now. In this case, it'll be the NT1 on both of them because I was using that same preset. So this is the NT1 with, believe it or not, the NT1 preset, and this is the MXL 990 with the NT1 preset. They sound way more similar than I would have expected once you add an EQ. This is the MXL 990, and this is the Rode NT1 Signature Series. Wow, they are pretty darn close in sound. Again, this is the Rode with the NT1 preset, and this is the MXL 990 with the NT1 preset. So I talked about this a lot in my video about the X1A microphone, but once you start adding in EQ and processing, it's pretty crazy how close you can get different microphones from different manufacturers to sound. But before we wrap up, I do want to compare the MXL 990 with one more microphone. So let's do it to it with the Lewitt LCT240 Pro. If you've watched any of my mic reviews in the last couple of years, you might know that this is one of my all-time favorite microphones for many reasons. I think it is a great sounding microphone. This is no effects and no processing, so just straight out of the box, an awesome sounding microphone. And it only keeps getting better because they just keep lowering the price. So currently, and this has been this way for a while, the MSRP has been $119, which is less than it has been in the past. And it comes with the shock mount now for that price. So that's a shockingly good deal because it used to just be the microphone, but now you get the dedicated shock mount, which is super nice. And the only other thing is it does come with a windscreen. I like using Lewitt's metal mesh windscreen because it slips right over the microphone, attaches magnetically to the shock mount when it's in there, and Peter Piper pitched a podcast. It does a great job at rejecting plosives. So that's really the only other thing you might need to buy, but it does come with a windscreen on its own. As you can see right now from me just holding it, you can position the microphone where you're not going to have too many plosive problems. And also, as you might notice, very little, really, if any, handling noise problems with this microphone. I guess you can hear that, but once you just grab the microphone and hold it, which I know is not how it's intended to be used, but hey, it's 2024 and everybody just holds microphones that aren't intended to be held anymore. This is what that sounds like, and it works incredibly well. And again, this is no effects and no processing. And then we'll jump over here to the MXL 990 with no effects and no processing. This is still a less expensive microphone at $99 versus $119. Probably worth considering the extra $20 if you like this microphone. But really, if you're choosing between these two, I would go for which one you like the sound of the most. If you love the sound of both of them equally, then I guess which one you like the design of most. The LCT240 is also available in black. It's the exact same microphone, just comes in pure black. But let's turn on some effects and some processing. So now you're listening to me on the 240 with the NT1 preset. This is what it sounds like with effects and processing compared to the MXL 990 with effects and processing. Oh my gosh, back over here on the Lewitt with processing, that difference was hardly noticeable at all going over to the MXL 990. They sound super similar. Maybe if I had to pick even between the process sounds, I'm probably biased. My ears really like the Lewitt. It's just so freaking good. And if I turn off the processing again, this is just the natural sound of the Lewitt, which I think this microphone sounds really good naturally. So if you don't want to deal with effects and processing, or you're running into a very basic interface that doesn't have all the EQ stuff like a Rodecaster does, and you don't want to or don't know how to do like software processing, especially if you're running something live and you don't know how to run it through software processing without adding in extra latency and delays, and it gets a little messy. You just want a microphone you can plug in and sounds good. I really like the Lewitt just on its own. The dry signal I think is really, really excellent. And then over here is the MXL 990, another great microphone on its own. The fact that I'm even comparing this to one of my all-time favorite microphones and kind of having a hard time choosing between them really does speak well for the MXL 990. So the really cool thing here, the really cool takeaway is that there are just so many great microphone options out there. And as you can kind of see, once you get to that $100 price point, the world really opens up when it comes to microphones, and you're able much more to then choose what you like versus just, here's a couple options that are available to you. Navigating that world can be a little complex and confusing, but hopefully this has sort of helped you at least, figure out what you might prefer and what you might enjoy a little bit so you can choose the best microphone for you. And speaking of things that are the best, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And because I do have so many mic reviews and comparisons, definitely check out the SE X1A review if you haven't seen that yet, or my entire playlist of mic reviews and comparisons.